Well, welcome to Christ in Culture. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and also cultural commentator. And today we're going to be talking about something that was in the news recently. And this topic pops up in the news every once in a while. I would say every 3 or 4 months, it gets some sort of traction in the mainstream media. And that is the whole issue of the UBI, or Universal Basic Income. If you recall a few years back when the presidential election of 2020 was heating up, there was a candidate on the Democratic side, Andrew Yang, who basically was proposing a universal basic income. And what is that? What is UBI? What is universal basic income? Well, the idea is basically you give all adults a certain threshold minimum salary income every year. So you give every citizen, and a lot of the figures have sort of coalesced around the amount of $15,000 a year. So you give every adult citizen of the United States, for example, if it were adopted in our country, $15,000 a year. You just give that to them. The government does on a monthly basis. So they would be bringing in roughly $1,500 a year, or between $1,000 and $1,500 a year. A month, and over 12 months comes up to around $15,000 a year. And the idea, and Elizabeth Warren also was a candidate a few years back for president, and she was advocating this. In fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, almost all of the Democratic frontrunners, whether this last election, I don't think it was the last election, but the election before, were all touting this universal basic income. So, very popular idea on the left. They think that people need to have a guaranteed minimum of income so that they can then jumpstart their careers, or jumpstart a family, or jumpstart basic survival skills like putting food on the table, putting a roof over your head, clothing yourself, providing basic transportation. So they come up with the figure $15,000 a year, universal basic income. Every adult gets $15,000 a year. And that is just something that allows them to then develop into someone with a career, someone with a business, for example. And I just read in the newspapers the other day, in the Detroit News, I think it was, where one of the cities where was that? Washington? Or no, it was on the West Coast. I think it was some city around San Francisco, is basically giving people universal income as an experiment. It was northwestern Evanston, Illinois, I think it was. Around Northwestern University up there. They have selected a number of people, I think 1,000 or so, or hundreds, and they're going to experiment with an idea of a universal basic income. Well, from a Christian perspective, from a biblical Christian perspective, this is a bad idea on so many fronts. You're actually giving people a salary for doing nothing. You're actually giving people income for not working. And we have in the Bible a verse that is very clear. It's 2 Thessalonians 3:10. Apostle Paul states it. He doesn't spend a whole lot of time trying to argue the case, because it's pretty much common sense. But he states, and this is in the Bible, this is a Christian biblical teaching, and his statement is, if you don't work, you don't eat. And it says, and now we're getting report that some of you are lazy and good for nothing and are taking advantage. And you must learn to work with your hands. And he goes on and explains. He was addressing people who were not working for a living, but were just basically waiting for other people to just feed them and provide for them. And they were doing their own thing. And that is exactly what the Democrat and the radical left want the government to do. They want to give you free food, free housing, free transportation, free clothing, free supplies, so that then they think you can build on that basis and then go on and have a nice career and generate income for yourself and then begin to pay taxes. So they are actually advocating free food, shelter, housing, and whatever else you want to spend your $15,000 on. And this would allow people, if they didn't want to work, if they didn't want to earn a living, they could actually freeload, mooch off the government their entire life, if that's what they wanted to do. And they tout this as something good. They tout it as something innovative. They tout it as something progressive and a benefit and a net positive for our society, when the Bible actually teach that this is contrary to human nature. What Paul is trying to talk about in the verse that we just read was that it's a couple things. Not only if you don't work, you won't eat, a basic fact of reality. Of course, unless somebody's going to give you that money, like the U.S. government would under this universal basic income, but that would undermine a lot of other incentives and motivations that are important in life. But I'll get to that later. But another thing is, it's not just if you don't work, you don't eat, which was the way it was for thousands and thousands of years. It's just a truism. If you don't work and you don't generate income, then you won't be able to eat because you will starve to death, because you won't have any money to go buy food. And so it's a cycle. And so that's one aspect of it. Then the other aspect of it is if you don't work, you shouldn't be able to eat, because you're not doing what you can do to earn your own keep. You're not putting food on your own table. You are not being responsible as an adult. And this is wrong. This is a bad characteristic of people who try to get out of work, but then expect other people to feed them, clothe them, provide transportation for them, house them, and on, all the necessities of life. So if you are not going to provide for yourself in these areas, someone else is going to provide for you, or going to have to provide for you. And so the basis for the Christian teaching is this universal basic income is a terrible, rotten, foolish idea, because it undercuts basic human incentives and motivations that actually are there by design. God designed humans. He talks about in the Genesis, the early accounts in Genesis, that the man shall earn a living through the sweat of his brow, and women through childbearing will suffer pain in childbearing. And so each, the man and the woman, have their own track of work that they're to do on this earth. The man's to go out, earn a living, provide for his family, provide for himself, provide for his children, his wife, fulfill his responsibilities. And then the woman is supposed to be the childbearers, and then raising children, attending to the children, taking care of the children, and taking care of the home. Her center of activity would be then the household, and keeping that organized and keeping everything working smoothly. The man is supposed to go out, earn the money, earn life support, bring it home, provide for his family. Okay, that cycle, that's a natural good cycle, and we should not interrupt it or intervene in doing anything like these experiments with universal basic income. But I've written down a number of different areas where this universal basic income idea is just a terrible idea. The first thing is that hunger motivates us to work. It's okay to experience hunger. It serves a purpose, and that is to produce in us the desire to work and therefore earn a living. If you didn't get hungry, if you didn't ever have to eat, you would possibly be inactive, and you would be lazy, and you would just goof around all the time, and you wouldn't earn an income because you wouldn't need to, because you don't get hungry if you didn't get hungry. But humans get hungry. We have to have food. We have to have a roof over our head. We have to have basic transportation because we need to get places. We have to have clothes on our back. We have to have life's necessities. And if we are not providing these for ourselves, then that means somebody else will have to provide them for ourselves. And then that's putting the burden of responsibility on someone else rather than the person. And the Bible teaches that we're supposed to be responsible individuals. We're to not shift the responsibility for our living and living expenses on others. And that's what would be taking place under some kind of universal basic income scheme that the Democrat and the far left want to implement in our country. It would undercut the entire motivation for going out to work. You know, work for thousands and thousands of years has always been a necessity. You had to work. If you're an adult, if you're not a child, I mean, children, they're still learning, they're still growing, they're being raised by their parents, they're in a sort of an artificial environment, the family, they're sort of in a cocoon, they are provided for by their parents. Their parents have to go out and work, the father does, or the mother in some cases, and they are then in this cocoon, and they're fed, they're clothed, they're housed, they're taken places, transportation needs are met, all of their supplies for school and extracurricular activities, they're all provided by the parents. And that's okay for children because they're children. They're not responsible adults. But then when they become adults, they need to step up into the world of adulthood and take on adult responsibilities. And one of the responsibilities is they have to earn their own keep. They have to bring home the resources that they have gathered by going out and exchanging their labor for money. That's work. They enter into a free contract with a company or some place of employment in exchange for 40 hours a week, or whether it's 20 hours a week or however many hours a week, for a certain rate of pay per hour. They take home a paycheck at the end of the week, and that paycheck provides housing, food, transportation, clothing, and all their supplies. That's what a responsible adult does, and that's what the Bible teaches. We have to be responsible. But under universal basic income, that whole motivation is just undermined, because then adults would not have to go out and work. It would not be a necessity. It would not, their stomach would not get hungry. It would not growl, and they would not have the necessity that drives them to search for a job, hold a job, and work and put in the hours, exchanging their time and their energy for a paycheck. They wouldn't have to do that. And that is interrupting a basic human motivation. And it's a bad idea to do that. And the Democrats, I mean, they constantly get human nature wrong. Constantly. Christians are always having to preach about how better it is to have limited government. Why? Because sinful people, when you put power in the hands of sinful people, they are going to abuse it. They're sinners. They're going to sin. And when you put a sinner in a position of power, he is going to abuse that power unless there are very, very strict checks and balances on him. And that's one of the beauties of our democratic government that was established in around 1776, is that the balance was there, that there is accountability. So you don't have one king, you don't have one dictator, you don't have one monarch that is not accountable. Every aspect of our government should be accountable to some other aspect of our government. And that keeps it honest. That keeps people honest who are running the government. And that's the same way with the incentive to work. Take away the incentive to work, and you're going to see a lot of people fall into poverty and stay into poverty. You're going to see people just sitting around, laying around, wasting their time, because the drive to feed their stomach and to provide the basic needs for their life is all going to be gone. The government's going to give them that $15,000 or whatever the UBI is, Universal Basic Income, comes in at, and that's going to undermine and cut the incentive to even try to work. So a lot of the programs today that we have, unfortunately, are doing the same thing. If a person can get on food stamps, have free food, then get on government housing, free housing, then get all kinds of benefits, entitlement programs. You just load up on that, and yeah, it's cutting the incentive for people, millions of people, from going out and earning their own living. This is a bad, bad thing. Now, the second thing is that government can't afford to really pay everyone $15,000 a year or over $1,000, between $1,000 and $2,000 a month. Government can't afford it. We are already in $32 trillion of debt. That number is so staggering and astronomical. It's even hard to even fathom what $32 trillion looks like. I don't even want to try to visualize. I mean, some people say if you stacked dollar bills one on top of the other, 32 trillion would be, go all the way up to the moon or what. It's just, the illustrations get crazy. And the point is that we're already $32 trillion in debt. That's the national debt. We're already running trillions of dollars in deficits every year in the budget. So Congress passes budgets that are they already know it's going to be way over budget, and they're just counting on the printing presses to crank out the money, create money out of thin air. And this is just going to add to the national debt. And what do you think a universal income, $15,000 a year for every adult, if they want it, is going to do to our national debt and our budget? It's going to just totally blow it up. It's going to explode. I mean, I have not heard one advocate of universal basic income explain how the government will even come close to paying for this. We're already overspending, and now you want to add a huge, expensive, mega entitlement program on top of it. That's the opposite of what we need to do. We need to start cutting these entitlement programs. It seems like every year the food stamp program, the SNAP, as they call it now, is exploding, booming year. More and more people signing up. Now they're encouraging college students to sign up. And so you have these artificially poor people, college students, qualifying now for food stamps. So you get all these population of college students. And whereas it was first intended for the poorest of the poor, now it's so generous, the cutoff level is that, a third of the people in this country are on food stamps. I can't remember the statistics, but it's just getting bigger and bigger every day. We have to start cutting back on these wasteful programs, not expanding them. So universal basic income is something that we really can't afford. It's irresponsible. So you have all of this irresponsibility. You have irresponsibility of the politicians, lawmakers, in talking about giving people free money, $15,000 a year. And then you have the people who would receive these being tutored in irresponsibility, because then they wouldn't be incentivized or motivated to go out and get jobs and earn a living like a decent person has to do. So it's bad all the way down. There's no good thing about it. Now, point 3 is that searching for a job is part of the whole work process, because it builds character, it builds qualities, it builds integrity, it builds virtues in the individual. So it's not just a matter of getting money. It's not just a matter of this person needs money to live on food, clothing, shelter, transportation. It's not just a matter of giving them cash. Okay, they have a need, so the government says, oh, they have a need, we'll give them cash. No, that's not the whole picture. The whole picture is that by going out and working, you have to develop character and virtues in order to hold a job. But before you even get your job, you have to develop character traits to search for a job. And you have to learn how to make decisions in that search for a job. You have to think about what you might be good at, or what your gifts are, and what your interests are. And are you going for a job just to pay bills, or are you going to try to go for a career, which is a long-term, decades-long process where you're not just looking for a job from job, but you're actually going into a field where you can specialize and get better and improve, and every job in that field is teaching you more about a basic skill. So let's assume that you're doing a typical career track. Well, searching for the job is part of the job. You have to go in there with some kind of reason why they should hire you. And therefore, you have to learn how to present yourself to people. You have to learn how to dress appropriately for the job. You can't just go in there with an attitude of, oh, I'm so great, I'll just go in with a t-shirt and jeans and sandals, and I'm so great, I'm so gifted, I'm so important that they'll just hire me. They have to hire me. No, you have to learn how to develop the right attitudes and personality and humility, actually, to go in, talk and sit down to the boss or the supervisor. You have to, in the job interview, you have to learn how to present yourself. You have to learn how to speak and represent ideas accurately. You have to learn how to listen to people and be sensitive to what they need, because it's got to be a win-win situation at a work situation. So these are all character building things. And if you just send people a government check every month for $1,200 to $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 a month, and giving them something like $15,000 a year total income, if you're just sending people a check, that is no character building in that. There is no virtue building in that. They can be the worst personality person in the world. They can use profanity all the time. They can have the worst social skills, and there's no incentive to improve if you're just going to give them money. So, but the regular job search and job holding process requires that you take your idiosyncrasies and your own individual personality, and you go out into the world, and then you have to negotiate with people, and you have to work with people at work, usually on teams. You have to work alongside people. You have to communicate to people. You have to think of people. You can't just think of yourself. You can't just think, well, this is what I want. I want money, so give me money. No, you have to say, okay, well, what do they want? And you have to give them what they want, and you have to do a good job, and you have to show up for work. You have to learn how to be responsible, and you have to schedule your time right. You have to think ahead. You have to go to sleep at night at a reasonable hour so you can get up in the morning if it's a morning shift you're in. All kinds of things that go into the character building, virtue building process of actual working for a living. And if you just give people money, universal basic income, you're bypassing that whole character development. Bad idea. From the start, it was a bad idea, but now when you start looking into it, it's really a bad idea. And you're basically, what you're doing is you're incentivizing a poverty class. You're going to see more poverty. You're going to see a growing underclass. You're going to, if you want to help the middle class, you don't give people $15,000 a year for doing nothing. Because what will happen is you will see some of the middle class people actually dropping down into the poverty class, the lower class, in order to get that $15,000, because they can do whatever they want to do with that $15,000. That's the whole point. The theory is that people need a basic universal income just to get going into whatever field they're interested in or whatever they want to do. If they're artists, they need $15,000 to get set up in an art studio of their own so they can start cranking out masterpieces, supposedly. But again, how many people are going to go on and create masterpieces? Just because they're artists doesn't mean they're master artists. So you're setting people up to do their own thing. Yes, you are. Pursue their own dreams. A person can take that $15,000 and travel a country in a van. They can go over and spend it traveling the world and doing whatever they want to do. But is that really going to help them character building, developing the right characteristics of being responsible citizens? Or is it more or less going to incentivize people to basically drop out of the workforce, to drop out of responsible adult citizenship and become pretty much lazy vagabonds, wandering here, wandering there, kind of like the hippies did, going whatever is fun at the moment, hanging out with their friends all the time, buying, for men, it could be a video game addiction. And now you give them $15,000 a year, some kid can sit in the basement and play video games all day and doesn't have to worry about feeding himself, doesn't worry about his housing, doesn't have to worry about clothes and transportation because he's getting $15,000. Bad idea. It's just going to create a whole underclass. And, again, whatever you subsidize, you're going to get more of. So if you're subsidizing poverty, if you're subsidizing a lower class lifestyle, you're going to get more of that. And I'm sure there will be still people who say, no, I refuse the $15,000. I'd rather be out in the workforce and make real money and be responsible and not be limited by this $15,000 a year check. But there will be a lot of people, millions of people, tens of millions of people. Who knows? I mean, do we really want to experiment? Do we really want to find out? What if giving everybody, adults, $15,000 a year for doing nothing and letting them use it in where they want? And this will probably still be on top of food stamp programs and all these other entitlement programs. So, I mean, that with all those goodies thrown in with the $15,000, the whole compensation package might come up to around $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 or more. So, do you really want to experiment with the American public? What happens in 5 or 10 years when you're doing this and you find that like half the people are living off the $15,000 and they're not really paying into the government taxes? It's going to go broke. The government's going to go broke. So many bad ideas. The wisdom of God is true. Paul said it in the New Testament. If you don't work, you shouldn't eat. It's true. It was true then. It's true now. And so this idea of the universal basic income, this needs to go away and not bother people anymore. It's a bad idea from the start. We'll see you back next week. God bless.